Have you ever fallen asleep in an inappropriate place? Maybe you fell asleep in class, or maybe even on the job, or maybe even in church. In the book of Acts chapter 20, scripture tells us a story about a man named Eutychus. Eutychus was gathered with the rest of his church in an upper room listening to Paul preach. As Paul's message went on past the midnight hour, Eutychus, who was sitting in a windowsill, became very drowsy and eventually fell asleep. Scripture goes on to say that once he fell asleep, he actually fell out of that third-story window and fell to his death below. I like to say that that's my wake-up call to never fall asleep during a church service again. As the church rushed downstairs to check on this man, they realized that he was no longer alive. But when Paul showed up to the scene, he saw something different. You see, Paul reached down, he picked up Eutychus, and he said, "This man is not dead. He is actually alive." Paul saw something that the rest of the church didn't see that day. He saw life in something that seemed dead. He saw life in someone who appeared to be asleep. So in other words, you could say that Paul gave Eutychus a wake-up call. One of the ways that we challenge our students in Belle Glade is by giving them a call to wake up. We challenge them to wake up from spiritual drowsiness, to move to a place of spiritual life. We challenge them to wake up from the dead things in their life and leave those things behind. We challenge them to wake up to the unique calling that God has placed on them so they step into everything that He's created them to do. One of my biggest fears is that many of us in the church are sleeping today, just like Eutychus. We may not be asleep physically, but we're asleep spiritually. We're sleeping morally. We're asleep to the things that God has for us, and we're missing out on so much because we're asleep. And in the book of Ephesians chapter 5, Paul gives the church at Ephesus a major wake-up call when he says, "Awake, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." That word awake literally means to rise up, to stir up. And I believe that just like He's doing in the lives of our students, God is calling you and me to rise up, to wake up and move from a place of spiritual drowsiness to a place of spiritual life. He is stirring something up inside of us so that we don't miss out on anything that He has created us to do. You see, the funny thing about sleep is that we actually don't know that we're sleeping until we wake up. You and I can be asleep spiritually without ever knowing it. But the real question is, how will we respond when God gives us that wake-up call? When He challenges us to wake up from that spiritual drowsiness? Have you ever overslept for something really important? Maybe you overslept for work, or you realized that you needed to spring out of bed and take the world's fastest shower and get ready in 3.5 seconds, and we're out the door. We have this amazing ability to go from complete and utter tiredness and drowsiness and be instantly awake in a moment. And I've often wondered, what if I responded to God's wake-up calls that way? Instead of hitting the snooze button spiritually, what if I jumped right out of my bed and I was as alert and I said, "God, what is it that you have for me?" All week long in Belle Glade, we've been challenging our students to wake up. And this week, many of them responded to the wake-up call in their life.